Hey everyone. I am so excited to introduce you to Brenda PanTango, who is my medical intuitive, and she has been a guide and a mentor on my path for many years now. We are going to discuss aspects of spiritual warfare and what's really happening behind some of these societal agendas that people are recognizing, but still not understanding why they're happening or where they're coming from. We're going to dive into all of that. We are in a spiritual war, which I have discussed at length for years now, and more people are waking up to that fact. How do we win a spiritual war? We have to understand the playing field, the battlefield, the tools, the weapons, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Because only when we understand all that can we know how to have truth and love triumph. We are going to be discussing some dark topics. That is a natural occurrence of talking about societal agendas, and that includes satanic agendas. And so I do want to remind people that part of awakening means looking at the darkness that can be really uncomfortable, but knowing that no matter how dark the darkness is, truth and love is always more powerful. So that's why I say that if somebody is afraid, they're not really awake. A lot of people consider themselves aware of what's happening in the world in terms of the matrix level of control and human enslavement. And yet they're anxious and they're afraid and they feel helpless. That's not awake. So you're going to leave this conversation, this interview, feeling empowered. You're going to have more awareness of what's really happening. You're going to have tools and that you can use to realign yourself with your highest expression and your most powerful self. We're going to be diving into all that. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Brenda, thank you so much for being here and having this conversation with me today.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, I feel honored to be able to share the wisdom that you have because what I've learned from you is not things that I hear anywhere else. I know that a lot of people who are watching this video are aware of societal agendas in terms of brainwashing and information manipulation and behavior manipulation that's happening in all these different ways. I've touched a little bit on the spiritual dimension and vibration hijacking that's happened, but I haven't gotten into the nitty-gritty of the what we could call the energetic manipulation and how that's one of the biggest factors controlling people. So, what I think we could start off with is let's talk about the spiritual warfare that's happening in reality right now. How would you describe that for people? If you could give people a big picture overview so that they can start to open their mind and see things from the most important dimension, which is the energetic dimension.
Great question. So, there have always been forces of dark and light on the planet. And the question is, why are they fighting harder now? And what I'd like to share is that the stakes are really high right now. They're high because there have been so many opportunities to accelerate right now on the planet. And what I mean by that is in April of this year, there were special openings on the planet where prophecies really began coming true. These are prophecies that were held by various indigenous cultures. And now the North America, the South America indigenous tribes that at one time were only locked into their own beliefs have come together. The prophecies during dream time caused the leaders to get together, have meetings without even meeting each other. And that has never happened before. So, what happened was that the tribes began working together, putting their thoughts, their energies, really committed to helping Earth, helping New Earth, our new time, where they really believe that we are embarking on a time of 1,000 years of peace and prosperity. But to get there, we have a long way to go. So the commitment level within the leaders of the tribes brought forth the ancients in spirit who want to help as well. So now the stakes are higher. These beings, these leaders bring their wisdom. They are wisdom keepers. And then we look at other things that also help. Many people that you may know that have left the planet, that have passed on, they're not so far away. They're just behind the veil, and many of them are helping. And then we have portal openings like August 8th. Well, August 8th, of course, happens every year. But right now we're at a time of high stakes where there's much more help, much more light on the planet. The earth itself, the Schumann resonance, is raising in its frequency and vibration. And here's where it all comes together. The place where we live and have been functioning always has been the 3D plane. That's where we work. That's where we go shopping. That's where we have recreation and fun. And the fourth dimension is where we are moving into. This is more of a spiritual realm. This is the realm where we have deeper understanding of things. This is the realm where we can begin to see these agendas and see that we're being suppressed not only as an individual, but as the whole of humanity. And we are being suppressed to keep us from shining even more and going to higher dimensions where our true possibility thinking is unleashed. And so, in this fourth dimensional realm, we reach out our hands, we reach out our hearts to help those that are having a hard time functioning, struggling in the 3D realm. The 3D realm is what looks good on paper. This has
Mhm.
always been important. It's our titles in our profession. It's the amount of money we make. It's the toys that
Mm.
we attract into our world. But what is starting to become important now during this time of spiritual warfare is that the fourth dimensional things are becoming important. That ability to listen to our heart, that ability to wake up our intuition and to discern if what we're hearing is really the truth. That ability to use common sense. As a society, we've been dumbed down and not encouraged through earlier public education years, perhaps, to not encouraged to use our common sense to think out problem solving. So that is something on a deep inner level we're being called to do now, to use our common sense, to wake up our intuition, to wake up to who we truly are if we want to shine as a sovereign being. So the stakes are high. And
Mhm.
3D alone is not going to take us through the tumultuous things that are going on now. We can be too easily led, whether we're talking about masks and things that don't make sense and a 6 foot distance and a new pandemic. And so the fourth dimensional realm is important, and protecting our sovereignty is the most important thing in that realm, in the fourth dimensional realm.
Gotcha. And what I'm thinking about as you're talking is it takes immense courage for a person to make the leap from that 3D realm and really the shackled way of thinking to the fourth dimension because the people who are still at the 3D level, they think you're crazy. To them, you're literally living in delusion. And that was a difficult point of my journey, first as a whistleblower bringing truth to a community that did not want truth, they thought I was delusional because I was shining a light on the darkness. And then, of course, in all my work of over the last few years of shining a light on pharmaceutical agendas and societal agendas, a lot of people look at me and think, Lauren, you're full blown crazy. You're not even living in this reality. And that's the truth. I'm no longer living in that reality. I left behind so much of that reality. And that takes immense courage. And I just want to give that encouragement to people if they're there. Yes, you have to essentially cross a bridge into a reality that looks delusional and unhinged to people who are still at the old vibration. But what I believe is that a lot of people who are watching this, if not everybody who are watching this, feels that compulsion deep within them for something more real. Maybe it's just the like this hunger for more truth that they feel. That hunger is the call to go to that next level of vibration and reality. And this is what I talked about a little bit before is in terms of spiritual warfare. A lot of people at the what we would I guess call the 3D level, they believe that society's problems are going to be solved with force and violence and guns and war. And that's hilarious to me. Right? That's so trying to solve a 3D problem with a 3D solution, but we need to solve this 3D problem with the higher level, that fourth dimension. And so the only way to do that is, well, we're going to get into this, some of these energetic techniques and energetic freedom modalities. Uh, but something I say frequently is the demons laugh at your guns. This is not how the spiritual war is going to be won. So I'm curious if you have any reflections on that topic, and also can we dive into the satanic agenda as well? More and more people are opening their eyes to this. You helped me open my eyes to this, and this can be a really hard awakening because the darkness is so dark. But let's get into that, and I'll just let you riff on that, whatever comes to your heart and mind to share.
Well, first of all, it's easier to buy into a Pollyanna ideal that there, if you don't think about darkness, there isn't darkness, and it's not the truth. So we don't obsess over it. We don't attract more. We just carry an awareness that comes from wisdom, that comes from discernment, and comes from truthfulness. The other thing, before we go too far into satanic agendas, is let's remember that we don't just live in the fourth dimensional world. And maybe it's not just an inquiring mind that's in a hunger that's causing us to want a deeper understanding. What if, on a soul level, we're being called during this time on the planet to be the visionaries for New Earth, for the new way that is peaceful, the new way that allows prosperity for everybody, the new way that allows for clean food that's energizing and nutritious for the body. There is so many technologies that will be released that will give us a new beginning. But maybe, just maybe, there's something within our soul that we signed up for long, long ago, subconsciously or otherwise, that says you were chosen or you volunteered and you are here on purpose. If we hold that mindset and we hold this role as a privilege, yes, it takes courage, but it's a privilege to hold this space for New Earth and to be compassionate, because we really have one foot in the fourth dimensional world and one foot in the third dimensional world. We really need to maintain our grounding and be compassionate to those that cannot expand their mind to understand certain thinking. They cannot see behind the agendas. If they can't see, they can't see today. Don't know about next week. And to hold that space of possibilities is a really good part of our humanity if we can find that inside of ourselves. So while I'm sure every one of us have had doors close in our face, have had some friendships that are distanced, have had some people that are certain we bumped our heads. And some people have shut down, and some people have said, just take it somewhere else. And so we can gather in places like this and have some honest conversations. And so when it comes to a satanic agenda, and how does that fit into all of this? What comes to mind for me is I don't know about you, but I don't know many people that would sign up for a satanic ceremony to participate in that. However, are you aware that there are times we get reeled in through our participation where we didn't consciously sign up? And an example of that would be the opening and closing ceremonies of the Olympics. So think about that. If you've heard about the closing ceremony in this past Olympic um, closing, there's 209 people from all the countries circling round and round and round. And of course, it's interesting because some of them are wearing their native clothing. And as they're going around, they are feeding an agenda that was set up by evil forces, very dark forces. And this agenda has to do with the whole of humanity, not just our country, but all over the world. And when emotions are added to that, when black magic is added to that, and the 209 countries are represented, and millions of people are watching this, the energy of all of the people watching, observing, is gathered together. Do you understand that this energy is creating a vortex under Paris? That vortex will be there and will cause individuals' lives to spin out of control. That's what a negative vortex does. Not only that, what happens next is the energy from all the people watching mixed with the agenda, the black magic, it gets wielded right into the earth in a very specific place, a very specific tonal line on a place on the globe. Could be Antarctica, it could be Maui. Okay, we all know what happened last year in Maui and how destructive that was. That was an evil satanic agenda. And the Olympics energy also wields right into the earth that will affect the next generation of humanity, the whole next race of humanity, and it affects every individual now. So suppose that agenda was about gender confusion. Suppose the agenda was to move more and more people away from their true self, the true essence of who they are, the true essence of why they came to earth, the true essence of what they could become, how they were going to use their gifts, how they're going to contribute to society. When confused with brainwashing and so many different um, parts of the agenda, one could lose track of who they are. One could go into self destructive behaviors. Okay. Um, I want to bring it back to what happens when that energy is wielded right into the earth at certain longitude points, latitude points, and tonal lines. These are specifically chosen and they match the tonal lines of the human. That's right, all of us, every human, from little tiny babies that are just born to elderly people, nobody is immune. And what
Can I
happens?
ask a question?
Yeah.
So is it are is this like saying it's almost like acupuncture points in the earth that would mimic acupuncture points in the human body. That's the only comparison I'd have, or is it like as within, so without, we
Mhm.
are mapped in the earth?
Yes, yes.
Wow, interesting.
It's so perfect, so well said. That's exactly how it
Mm,
works, Lauren. Yeah.
mm,
And so these get jammed up in our body and in our psyche, but it's not just the body. If it was just the body, a psychic could see that and just do a removal. But this is actually in the holographic architecture of the human, and it goes up from right around us. This is the first layer of our body, the physical layer that we can see right here, and then emotional and mental layers, etheric layers, and the fifth dimension. But these go way up and they're locked in, some of them on the 12th dimension. That would be about 11 inches above our head. It's beyond what a psychic can see, but it can be found when doing scans on the human body. And there is a service that can actually remove that. And that's part of what I have created, a protocol that's amazing to remove that. But
mhm,
what I wanted to share is, who would think that something so that appears innocent, like watching a celebration of countries coming together, could be used with a negative spin, a negative twist that causes destruction, that causes different kinds of things, like could be sexual misery, it could be feeling like I'm not enough. There are so many different agendas that cause us to be dumbed down in humanity, and that's how we get tricked sometimes.
mm, mm. This is making me think about the experience I had that was a huge catalyst for my awakening, where I whistle blew the systemic sexual abuse at my nutrition school. I discussed this in my book, The Scorpion and the Lion, because what you're describing is people are subconsciously, unconsciously recruited to give their energy to these dark rituals that have really dark ripple effects on Earth. And what I experienced as a microcosm of that dynamic was I and so many other women were unconsciously recruited by this psychopath to give our energy to a really dark agenda. We we didn't know what we were doing. That's this tricky line of what is consent? Consent is not a matter of did you say yes? It's a matter of could you have said no? Do you have the information to say no to this? And a lot of people aren't saying, no, I'm not going to participate in these satanic rituals. Like, no, I'm not going to go to a Taylor Swift concert because it's a satanic ritual, because they don't know that. They don't have fully informed consent. And so we got to talk about this. That's why I feel like this fire in my belly to put this awareness in front of people. You have to know how your energy is being used. You have to know the ways that these really dark minds on earth are overriding your consent. We all have power to say no, but it takes awakening to get there. It takes immense awakening and self control to opt out of not watching the news at all, not listening to pop music, not watching the Olympics. Like, that's where I am right now. But at a previous point in my life, I would just turn on pop music, not realizing that my energy could have been recruited in that moment for some negative purpose, right? Do you have
Yeah,
anything to add to that? Do you think I nailed it, or is there things that you would like to add to that?
that was great.
Okay,
I did
I'm
want to
glad to hear that.
mention that you might not be aware there's narcissist empathy tags as well. So those can get imprinted, and they do. Dozens of those get imprinted into our holographic architecture, and that can cause us. I think everybody that I've talked to recently has had some experience with the bullying of a narcissist or the gaslighting of a narcissist. It seems so rampant, and we might wonder, like, it didn't seem like that 10 years ago. It seems like, or 15 years ago, it seems like there's so much more on the planet. And we often ask that question, why is there so much more on the planet? And why am I running into this situation more than one time? These tags get imprinted in our field and they will attract more situations. And so I think that's important to remember if we've been harmed by a narcissist and we've had to take our time coming back and building ourselves back up to understand, yes, there were lessons, but also there was a real vulnerability there that causes
And
us to get entrapped.
So not just a psychological vulnerability, not just an emotional vulnerability. I've talked about those at length. We're talking about there's an energetic vulnerability that a lot of people don't recognize. Let's talk about what tags are now. What are these energy tags and these energy seals?
Okay, so they are energetic distortions that cause us to be less than the empowered person we were designed to be. And these are put with specific agendas into the earth first, and they affect all of humanity. So they can be found when scanning with a chart using an individual, putting them on the chart, scanning, and you can actually find these very specific tags. Some example would be porn tags. Sometimes we've been affected by that, where we know somebody who's a really great person, but they happen to go down a rabbit hole of addiction. There are addiction tags. There are tags for entitlement. And we've all noticed, most likely, that in the last many years, there is an energy of entitlement on the planet that is very skewed, very distorted, and where people just expect to be swooped up, taken care of. There's just a lot of things that go along with that, but it doesn't follow the laws of the universe. It doesn't follow spiritual principles, and it doesn't follow our own soul guidance. So, seals have been going on for thousands of years. Every monarchy has their own seal. And those seals get placed on the heart of the human, layer after layer. So it's not just one seal, it's another seal on top of another. These cause the heart to be oppressed. There are seals that keep us in financial struggle. There are seals that keep us as a collective group within humanity feeling like slaves that need to struggle, work really hard, get exhausted, but still pay taxes, still follow certain rules that are set up that are not for our highest good. But humanity can be controlled through these seals and these tags. And there are also energetic devices that cause us to be gagged, unable to speak our truth, unable to stand up for what's right. We know so often we have a burning desire or an itch to say something because we've witnessed something that's wrong. No, no words come
Mm,
out.
yeah.
These are actually gag seals that are
Oh,
purposely put within the person. There's seals that are on one side of the body that will lock down the feminine energies. There's a whole different type of draconian seals that are on the other side of the body that distort beautiful male energies. And all of us have male energies, all of us have female energies, but there's very specific ones, and there's very specific ones that cause us to be less successful than we really could be with the things we're trying to create or manifest.
mm,
So there's a lot of things that cause us to lose hope, to dim our light, to play small in the world, and that serves an agenda. These go
there's
back
so much here.
years. Yeah, there's a lot, but these go back into generational curses. So some
Mm,
of these seals, and it's not about our specific lineage all the time. Sometimes it's about female oppression or human oppression that has come through so many generations.
mm. Yeah, I'm trying to sit with where do we go first because this is key key information and there's so much here. I think people might be having dots connecting in their mind from what you've shared already. Uh, and the thing that I want to land on for people is there's a misconception in our world. I think this is just the human brain or the nature of this reality that we're in, that we think that or we tend to give more weight to a physical manifestation. So, for example, as a person who was in a psychologically and psychically abusive relationship, there were people in my life who, bless their dumb little hearts, were like, oh, that's not real abuse. Because for them, they really thought that abuse was when somebody hits you and you have a bruise. Now, the thing is, what I learned is that actually that's a lower grade abuse. Now, I don't mean to discredit that, it's horrible. But in that situation, a person is able to recognize what's happening on the physical realm. There's more validation, right? And there's also, in a way, it makes it easier to find solutions because you can touch it, you can feel it, you can see it. When we're dealing with the psychological, psychic, and energetic realm, it's harder to see the problem, which gives more power to the problem. It also makes it harder to see the solution, which gives more power to the solution, though. But people can tend to default to thinking, well, that's not so important. Like if my mouth really, if I really had a ball gag in my mouth and I wasn't able to talk, that would be a serious issue. I think there are some people listening who get it though, who get, no, if you have an energetic gag, that is as potent, if not more potent.
Mhm.
That's the dark trick here, is because we don't see it with our eyes, we don't taste or feel it. There's this inclination to diminish or discredit the effects. And so, what I really want to land on my 2 cents here is to help people understand no, this is the crux of the matter. And I do feel this is one of my gifts in the world, is because I was one of those people who was born more attuned to the psychic and intuitive realm than the physical realm.
Mhm.
It made me not fit in most of my life because the way people were acting and living really didn't make sense to me. It didn't make sense to reality, to
Right.
my sense of reality. But I want to land on that. And is there anything else you'd add around that so people can understand the importance of these energetic influences?
Yes. You have said in the past, Lauren, that you really believe and understand through research that depression is a spiritual issue. There is something incongruent spiritually with the connection of the individual. And I have found the same thing. When people have a lot of tags and seals that are limiting them, there is often depression. Most recently, I had the opportunity to work with a man who had PTSD from his time in the military, and he was in deep depression. And his therapist recommended that he work with me. And it was the most beautiful thing to work with him and remove these seals, these tags, and bring him back to who he truly was.
Mm,
We worked with him on a soul level. We rebuilt his soul and fortified him and helped him come back to who
mhm,
he is, and to see his wife and him together, and both of them were shining. She also had hers removed. And the power struggles between the male and the female, the husband and the wife, the way that they came back after removal, and they had respect for each other in a brand new way. Truly, she was excited about being wind beneath his wings instead of being an adversary for him and so discouraged that he just couldn't get out of his funk. His sense of humor came back. He had light in his eyes. It was really incredible. And that's something anybody could wrap their head around. We don't have to go into details about exactly what was ugly that was locking us down. The point is, maybe there's a limit on your optimism, or you hear words like your limitless potential, and you kind of roll your eyes and you're like, yeah, well, how's that working for me? It hasn't so far, blah, blah, blah. And being able to have these things released and come back to who we really are, and then see what we can create and manifest for ourselves.
Oof. Yeah, I've had a lot of chills as you've been talking. I definitely had the truth chills during that. Uh, I There's so much around the warfare around masculine and feminine energy. My book, The Invisible Corset, I go into the warfare of the beauty industry to suppress real feminine energy. Real feminine energy is the catalyst for evolution. Like it is the real spiritual leader, and that's why it is so suppressed, specifically in religious communities where the main goal is control rather than spiritual reconnection.
Mhm.
And this is just connecting a lot of dots in my head as you're talking, where I mean, obviously, there is some kind of spiritual, psychological agenda right now to create this huge rift between men and women and to make healthy relationships seem like a far stretch or even impossible, and just this very divisive warfare energy between men and women. And so this is interesting to hear that this is part of the energetic programming, and the energetic implants
Mhm.
have led to that.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
There's another place that is really affected on all of that, and that is, we all have higher guidance. We all have an innate sense of body wisdom. And to connect with that body wisdom, we sometimes need to go up in our frequency. It's not just a mood thing. There are ways that we can lift ourselves up. However, when the seals are removed because they're purposely put in a place that blocks down the pineal gland and covers it up so that we're unaware of certain things that are going on. Well, if this is blocked, sometimes it's hard to connect with that body wisdom. It is our body wisdom that knows when we start to get um, fatigued, when we start to feel really, really brain fog, um, exhausted. It is our body wisdom that knows whether we need to get some rest, whether we need some supplements, whether it's time to slow down a little bit. Our body wisdom knows those things, but sometimes it's really hard to get in touch with that energy. And the reason is because these seals are intentionally blocking that information from coming through to us.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
What I think would be helpful too is let's go into some examples of how these energy tags and seals can get implanted in us through our lifetime. And we're not saying this with any blame, because people don't know, and it just happens as we go through life on this earth. But the more we know, the more we can be empowered. Truth is knowledge. And then there's also a dynamic of, like you said, some of these energy tags and seals, like the Vatican seal, which you mentioned to me, that goes way, way back. So yeah, let's talk about how people can get these tags and seals moving through their daily life, and then how it also can be, passed down.
Okay. So as we go through the birth canal, there are tags that already begin. They have been planted in the earth a long, long time ago. We could say eons ago, because the forces of dark and light have been doing this since the beginning of time. So even a newborn baby, I can measure and see how many there are within that individual. And then as we go through life, during those times that we get vulnerable, when a person's on chemo, I've done hundreds of case studies on this, and I measure how many tags and seals and implants they have. It can get mixed in with certain medications.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So I believe I have sensed I didn't know what I was sensing, but I've talked about the spiritual warfare of antidepressants because I see that separating people from their souls,
Yes.
and so that makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And, surgeries, when a hip is implanted, is that all there is? And I'm not saying a
Mm,
person should never have surgery, I'm just trying to help educate that a person ends up with more tags, seals, and implants after the surgery. So
mm,
the body is getting used to foreign energies and thought
gotcha.
programs. So we often will hear, my friend had a heart surgery, let's say, and he wasn't the same after that. Hello. There's a couple
Whoa.
reasons why. The anesthesia causes the person to go out of body, which means there is serious damage to the soul. It can be repaired. I do that. It's called soul rejuvenation.
Mhm, and I will say that's something you've helped me with. I've done so many of your services, but as a child, very, very ill, I had numerous, medical procedures that required anesthesia. So and I'm back to my full soul strength here, as I'm sure
Oh,
it
yes,
shows.
you are.
Yeah, I'm sorry to
Great.
interrupt, but I wanna say that to
No,
give
it's
people that
great.
hope and
Yeah.
clarity.
Yeah. And then when women have female surgeries, there's all kinds of energetic ulcers that end up staying behind within the lady parts. And this vulnerability causes more infusions of implants and tags, and they can be removed, absolutely. But this is part of what we don't realize when we're recovering because we're just trying to speed up the process so we can go drive the car and get back to life. So that's part of it. Also, when people use psychedelics, whether it's mushrooms, when they use ayahuasca,
Ayahuasca is a big
yeah,
one. I see yep, it's a
absolutely.
big one, and people are looking for that quick spiritual enlightenment pill, which is a hypocrisy in and of itself. It doesn't work that way.
Mhm. There's a lot of deception in that world. There's a lot of astral energy. It's not clean energy, and it leaves the people so vulnerable.
Mhm,
And so there are many effects that happen that people didn't count on. And this is true for MDMA. It is
mhm,
true for Bufu, the poison, that the frog poison that
and
people
a
use,
and now ketamine
and
is being
ketamine.
used, blow
Absolutely.
that's
Yeah.
yeah, and, where was I gonna go with this? Uh, yeah, I want it requires humility to heal. See, that's the thing that I had to have that on my path too. But what I see from a lot of people who are using these substances as part of their healing, they really believe that they're doing something that helps them. And because they're invested in that belief, they're going to tell themselves that these things are helping them and they're not going to be often they're not willing to see the harms, and it takes immense humility to be able to question, "Oh, maybe I made a choice that moved me a little bit backwards." But that's where healing can happen, and if somebody is willing to have that humility and that growth mindset, they can jump forward leagues and leagues on their healing, and it is as if the harms didn't happen, because that's my definition of healing. It is reaching a level of consciousness where the harms that were incurred on the previous level of consciousness are released and erased. So I wanna say that we're talking about something that requires humility to actually hear the message we're saying. It can bring up some discomfort to hear it, but there is so much room for immense healing, especially with Brenda's work.
Thank you for sharing that. Another way to say that is, it is our personality self that will sometimes say, "Oh, this sounds so exciting. I will be really cool if I do this, and I'll just accelerate on my path in one weekend through one of these ayahuasca journeys." Well, just use that one as an example. And what happens is the inner guidance, the spiritual guidance that each of us are born with. We have a guide, and that guide is here from the moment of birth to the moment of our last breath. But that guide gets very, very confused when a bunch of artificial guides come in. So there are astral beings, entities that join in the party, and now they get to give after the hallucinogen, hallucin, hallucinative experience. They get to be the ones to give advice. They get to be the ones to have their voice heard. And it can really, really cause a lot of discourse on the path in life because these guides have no idea why the individual came to Earth, what their plan was for coming to Earth, what their true innate gifts are, what their contribution to humanity is. And so there's a lot of noise in there, and people like that. They like to think, oh, I'm so spiritual. I now have lots of voices, lots of advice, lots of big ideas, but understand the big ideas are often fueled by agendas. So these seals and tags, there is such a vulnerability. They get imprinted in the person, and often the person goes more off course. Maybe they still end up where they were going to originally end up, but the detour can have a lot of drama. And I've seen it again and again. I've done hundreds of case studies on this. There isn't anybody that gets through these experiences without compromising their soul. And the soul pieces can actually be measured, and it's a numbers game. If you're going to lose 180 soul pieces through a journey with MDMA or one of these mind altering experiences, there's that much less to work with to find your true sovereignty, to stand up in that and be who you are and shine in the way you were
Mhm.
designed to shine. It can be repaired, but it's important to know that people later experience depression 6 to 8 months later. They have no idea that it is linked to what they created, and they certainly have no idea that seals got imprinted in them when they were in that very vulnerable state, throwing caution to the wind and saying, somebody join me on my life path. And there's so much deception. I once worked with a woman who was referred to me by a naturopath, and she had gone to Ecuador and had a wonderful experience, just blew her mind when she did an ayahuasca journey. So she moved to Ecuador, and she had been there for 6 years, using it many times a week. And this woman was only 34 years old, and her whole face was sagging. She experienced a palsy that came from the experience. Yet she went back.
Mm.
She was very comfortable no longer being in her skin, but having these experiences. And it was the most heart touching experience to find out what it was really like from within that world.
Mm. Mhm. This is an important topic too for people to learn discernment between good and bad, intuitive wisdom and intuitive support on your path. Because when we're talking about the astral realm, there are a lot of psychics and intuitives out there who are certainly hearing voices. they're certainly getting intuitive guidance. But the question is, from whom and at what level? Because let's dive into that. You have a really clear way of describing the different planes, and the main thing is that people understand dark guidance can come in and be confused as good guidance if people are just opening themselves up and being like, I want to connect with the spiritual realm. Well, who do you think's in the spiritual realm?
Yeah, it's a real hodgepodge of energies that are in the astral realm. And so astral traveling is something that people do with their mind, and they go down into an underworld place that is not a spiffy, clean, energetic place. Where divine beings are, where angels are, it's higher realms. The energies are more pristine, they can be measured. And when you can raise yourself to that level, not just in your mood and not using recreational drugs. Recreational drugs will take somebody into the lower realms, the astral realms. Now, And personality is the other thing that takes an intuitive into the astral realms. When we work from soul, and we really have our soul connected, all intact, when we're able to go higher to the planes where the divine ones are residing. It's called plane 5, plane 6, plane 7. These connections are available, but they come from a place of humility, like you said earlier. It is the personality self, which is also called the ego self, that goes this way to get information. This can be entertaining in a whole group of people having an intuitive message night or whatever. That can be very, very entertaining. But the measurement for accuracy is very low. If the ego and the personality is up here at 80%, that only leaves 20% of possibilities for accuracy. That can really send a group of people spiraling when they get advice together in a group that this is what their next step is. Sometimes messages in those groups will lead dozens of people or hundreds of people or thousands of people to all do a meditation at the same time. We're going to heal the world. We're going to some type of beautiful agenda done in a group on certain significant points. 8 8 is called a portal window opening of goodness. But these tags and seals can get downloaded on every participant for those types of occasions. I never do group meditations in large group because there's a real vulnerability there. Coming back to the readings, a person's spiritual hygiene and the way in which they conduct themselves in their own lives is going to be a very big indicator on whether it's a quality reading. It's important to have spiritual hygiene. It's important to disconnect from the last person one was working with. It's super important that the person disconnects from their own personal life so that the messages coming through are not stopping right here at the ego because maybe the intuitive is going through a radical time in life. Maybe they got fired. And so that energy from their own emotions, if that isn't cleared away, or if they're having pain somewhere in their body, they may say that their pain, maybe their heart pain is emotional, but they're feeling so much heart pain when talking to this person in a session that they actually tell the person they're going to have a heart attack. That would be something I have witnessed before in somebody that did readings without spiritual hygiene and just felt, oh, I'm so light, I don't need protections. There can be a bleeding from one person's sacred reading, their sacred information that's shared can bleed right into the next one if the intuitive isn't working with spiritual hygiene. So, to wrap
Mhm.
that up, the level in which they're connecting is very, very important for it to be clear, for it to be pristine, for it to be measurable. It needs to come from higher sources. If the person's using recreational drugs, just playing with reading, not taking it seriously, not being properly trained, just doing it in a flippant way. And we see this sometimes at psychic fairs, even that when they're going from one person to the next, and there's not a moment in between to do certain things to create a clean, pristine environment, that's risky business. There can
Mhm.
be other energies that come through. It can send the person into a spiral. And the other thing is, never should there be fear tactics. A good intuitive would never use fear tactics to manipulate into
Mm.
having other services or
Mhm.
telling them they have curses on them and that only this person, I've heard this before, only this person could fix it. It would cost $4,000.
Mhm.
And then when they come back to say, I really need the title to your land, and that is so upsetting because especially medical intuitive is, whether it's that or it's love life, whether it's the next career move, whether it's figuring out path and purpose, this is sacred. This is an honor. to be able to take somebody's hand, to meet them where they're at, to work with compassion and empathy. All of these are qualities of a good intuitive.
Mm.
And
This
when
is
I first, I'm sorry, my first
yeah, go ahead.
intuitive class was in 1999. And I worked with somebody who the teacher was brilliant at finding missing children. But that type of work caused him to burn out. And the types of things you can imagine what he saw in
Yeah.
his work.
Oh, yeah.
But he
Yeah.
instilled some really excellent qualities in myself and a desire to go much, much deeper. And then about 15 years ago, I was working with a NASA research scientist who showed me how to measure the accuracy of an intuitive reading. And he found my accuracy to be more than 99%. It was 99.469. And that was really, I knew I did what I did. I knew that I was always integral, always prepared, always kept things confidential, but to actually have the measurements on it, and I teach that system today.
Yes, I have been through your class teaching that. So that's the thing is energy can be measured. And that's what Brenda teaches, that's what she does. But if people are familiar with the map of consciousness, how was that created? It was created through kinesiology, muscle testing, measuring energy. So it's a really solid framework to be able to measure energy in different ways. And so that is a really a core of Brenda's work. And I wanted to revisit that last discussion just in terms of egoic influences in spiritual communities or intuitives, because I have lived in two areas, two regions that are specifically known as like spiritual hubs, and they just kind of gather a lot of people who are into spirituality from their ego, which erases the whole point because the spiritual journey is that of separating from the ego, releasing the ego. And it's not just talking the talk, it's not just the appearance, whatever people think it is. And so there's also a piece of discernment as well is there can be lots of people, there are lots of people who present as very spiritual and they talk the talk and they look the part, but they have huge raging egos they're carrying around, and that just negates the quality and their capacity for any true spiritual guidance. So I'd say that's one of the key things is just to have discernment around what you, Brenda, have called the personality self. If that's really engaged, the person can't be really trusted for spiritual guidance in any way. It doesn't mean they're a bad person, just means they're not a good vehicle for spiritual guidance to come through.
So true. And also, there's a lot of spiritual teachers out there that work from ego. I
Oh
worked arm
yeah.
in arm with a teacher at one point as we were co-teaching, and that person did not want the students to shine, did not want the students to really learn the system that we were teaching. That person wanted to be put on the pedestal and thought and have people that were more like disciples saying,
Mm,
"Well done, teacher." And that's really a sign of extreme ego. And the divine ones will cap how high a person goes with ego. So
mm,
there is a specific formula that's used to stop that person from causing harm to others, because a person with a big ego can do that. Not only can they mislead, but they can manipulate.
yeah.
It can,
Yeah.
I have seen in that classroom, I have seen students that were beyond discouraged. They were squashed like a bug, and that should never happen in spiritual trainings
Mm.
or in spiritual communities.
This makes
So,
me think perhaps this is the reason so many people are really confused around what good spiritual guidance is or what the spiritual journey is about, because the mainstream spiritual teachers, whether we're talking about the Dalai Lama, who's satanic, horrible, John of God, who was, promoted as he was awful, awful human being, manifestation of evil on legs. And then we have Oprah. We
Yeah.
have these people who are presented as the epitome of a spiritual teacher, and they're a fraud. And so we've kind of been brainwashed in that way. And I tell you, I had my own humbling moments of looking at people who I thought were spiritual beings, and I wanted to emulate what they were creating. And then I had a moment of like, oh, I want nothing to do with that. That's the wrong path.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that's
So,
humbling. And
yeah,
that
humbling for
takes a
sure.
deep look at self to be that honest and then to forgive self, love self, and course correct as
Mhm.
mhm,
Yeah, there's no shame or guilt involved. It's just we know what we know until we know better. And the this is why we're on earth. I think that's why shame is not really a big piece of my healing journey because there's a wisdom in me around no, I'm here to learn.
mhm.
Like, why would I feel ashamed? I'm always in integrity doing the best I can do, and if I've done poorly, then there's a great opportunity for me to learn a lot.
True.
And I think that's a really healthy place for people to be because shame has such a low vibration. It really can stall the healing process.
Within the Vatican seal is a lot of shame. So you were able to not be as knocked down by that as
Mm.
as many people are. But if somebody was shamed because of their religion, was shamed because of something that happened earlier in life or it's happened a few times, they can really struggle with it. And they might find 21 tags as an example, or seals, I should say. Um, the seal would be imprinted from the Vatican, which is a religious influence that has to do with shame, humiliation, you're not enough. Those are the tags. Those are the energies, what kind of effect it has. And it can show up throughout life. Doesn't matter the age of the person. And it's really awesome that you were able to just have an inner knowing, that innate knowing that that's not mine.
Mm.
So I
But
work with
that's
people all the
but
time that
yeah.
get held up because of shame.
But that's such a good point. Going back to this core of the discussion is some people have these influences that are in that way outside of their control. It's happening on the energetic level and I certainly had influences where I have struggled more in certain areas of self-expression or whatever it may be, early experience with narcissism. And now I can look back and think, well, I probably had a lot more tags and seals in those arenas. And you did help me remove those. And it was a powerful shift in my being when I did that first session with you around the energy tags and seals. It was very profound. I did feel a lot of fatigue. And I would say, is that the nature of the deep energy work? Like it was a profound shift for me. I was crying and then I felt super, super tired. And then I was like, whoa, I'm shining.
Yeah. Yeah. It does. It creates an expansiveness inside. The heart moves in a way that it couldn't before, for possibilities, for love, for passion, for manifesting. More light comes into the person and their energy becomes fortified after that. So the process
Mm.
I created, um, I sometimes do it remotely from late at night while they're sleeping. When we did yours, it was the middle of the afternoon. And because of your inquiring mind, we matched up the time where you laid down while I did the work. And now I do the work a lot while people are sleeping. They just wake up,
Gotcha.
they're feeling really great.
Mm.
But with you, you needed to be that participant that said,
Oh, I
okay,
wanted to know. I was like, I want to hear what's
absolutely. And I
happening.
love that
I don't
about
want to
you.
miss a second of this.
I love that authenticity that you know what it is that you're doing,
Yeah.
and it's wonderful.
Yeah, it was a very palpable experience for me, unforgettable, powerful, and you have seen the shifts in my life.
Absolutely, absolutely. I just had that opportunity a couple days ago, 3 days ago, and I was working with a woman, um, in another part of the country, and she had said, "I don't know what it is you did. I don't have to understand it, but I have cleaned every closet in the house over the weekend. And my husband's like, hey, are you going to hit the garage next? And I'm like, hey, babe, that's yours. But she was
Yeah,
so pleased. She was in a depressed funk for years and she had so much extra energy. So for her, I just did that during the nighttime as her service. And I worked on her 3 nights in a row to take care of the female influences, to take care of the other two. And 3 nights later, on the fourth day, she was just like, woo, getting so
that's
much done.
yeah, that's how it works, and it's almost for people who haven't had truly profound energetic releases or energy healing, I think it's something that has to be experienced to be understood what we're talking about. It's very, very powerful.
Mhm.
So, tell people where they can find you if they are listening to this conversation and they're thinking, "Wow, I am ready for this healing. I want to remove these influences that are causing the whether it's self-sabotage patterns that nothing else is touching in their life and they feel like they've tried everything or chronic health conditions. You've helped me there too. uh, tell us how you can help people and what their next step should be.
So people can go to my website, brendapantango.com. I am available for medical intuitive work, for soul rejuvenation, to bring the soul back together. Sometimes we've gone through tough times wondering whether we even belong here, uncertain if we want to stay on earth, if we want to continue to contribute because we've been so bogged down. And sometimes people have been through chemotherapy, and that is very destructive to the soul. It can be rebuilt, though. And when we're rebuilt from the inside out, we begin to shine. We begin to get refocused. We begin to have the pep in our step. And so that's one of the services that I do. And it's a beautiful healing that I created 15 years ago. So, part of what I do on earth is to create healing processes that I use with clients. Also, the tag seal removal, I call it matrix deprogramming. And I like to do all three of them as a special project. For males, it brings them back into their divine masculine energy, separate from manipulation, separate from distortions in the male energy. And that's a really beautiful thing to be restored to who they really are. So these are available on my website. I like to have a 20-minute conversation with people first so we can really talk about what inspired the call. People rarely do this just because they're curious. Usually they have some kind of knowing that something is off and they're really not like themselves. And for those people, I'm willing to go into the dark places because that's what I did. That's what I signed up for when I came to Earth, to go into those dark places. I built out the processes for 15 years because the processes weren't available. You can look online and you can learn about seals and tags and implants, but the processes that are out there are 36% effective. They simply work with frequency music, they work with the mind and visualizations, but when you actually measure the effectiveness, it doesn't work. So I go into these spaces and put 200 hours and more sometimes into one particular healing process so that I can help those people that are in dark places. I had the opportunity to work with somebody who's going to be released from prison in 2 weeks, and we're getting her ready to go. She doesn't know she's in a program. I work with special clearances so that I have the authorities to work with people
Mhm.
that might get in the way because they're resistant. This person deserves a fresh beginning, and her
Mm.
mama knows it.
Mm.
And her mom knows it's the best gift she could give her on a soul level, to put her soul together, to remove all the tags and seals and implants. So when she comes out with her goals, she has the best opportunity possible to succeed. And that's why I'm here, to help people become the innate healer that they are, that they can wake up the body wisdom. And so the processes that I have, the readings I do, help individuals remove anything energetically that would get in the way so that they can become that healer and have the kind of successes Lauren has had. And that's why she's so passionate about what she does.
Thank you for being on Earth, Brenda. Thank you for choosing to come here this this time around to give us your wisdom. Humanity needs it. We are very, very grateful.
Thank you.
And I am so deeply grateful for all your support on my path.
Thank you.